For 3,000 cycles, the Velkari had one absolute law. The sacred bond could only be formed between a matriarch and her chosen successor, and breaking this bond meant death for both parties. They learned how wrong they were when a human diplomat named Marcus Chen smiled, extended his hand, and accidentally became soul-bound to the most powerful leader in the galaxy. My name is Sentinel Kravas, and I served as the personal guard to Matriarch Celathorn for 47 cycles. I was there when it happened. I was there when everything we believed about the sacred bond, about our biology, about the very nature of our species, was shattered by a simple human gesture of friendship. The human delegation arrived at the Grand Spire on the 7th moon of Velkar Prime, with all the pomp and circumstance their young species could muster. They were new to the Galactic Concordance, barely a century into their membership, and they carried themselves with that peculiar mixture of confidence and ignorance that we had come to expect from species who had not yet learned their place in the cosmic order. Their ships were crude by our standards, their technology laughably primitive, and their understanding of interstellar diplomacy was, to put it kindly, rudimentary. But they were persistent. By the stars, they were persistent. The human ambassador was a male named Marcus Chen. He was young for a diplomat of his species, perhaps only 35 of their solar cycles, with dark hair that he kept short and eyes that seemed to catalog everything they observed. He wore what humans called a suit, a strange formal garment in dark blue that seemed designed to restrict movement rather than allow it. When he entered the throne chamber of the Matriarch, he did not show the proper signs of submission that protocol demanded. He did not lower his gaze. He did not bare his throat. He simply walked forward with his head held high and a smile on his face that we could not interpret. We did not understand human facial expressions then. That smile, we would later learn, was meant to convey friendliness and respect. To us, it looked like a predator baring its teeth. Matriarch Celathorn was 500 cycles old, ancient even by our standards, and she had led our people through 3 major wars and 2 periods of famine. Her chiton was the deep purple of aged royalty, marked with the silver scars of a dozen assassination attempts that she had survived through cunning and strength. When she spoke, entire star systems listened. When she commanded, fleets moved. She was, in every sense of the word, untouchable. The human approached the throne, and I moved my hand to my plasma blade, but the matriarch raised one claw to stop me. She was curious about this strange little creature who seemed so unafraid in her presence. "Ambassador Chen," she said in perfect galactic standard, her voice resonating through the chamber with the harmonic undertones that marked her as a speaker of truth. "Your species has requested a formal alliance with the Velkari Imperium. This is unprecedented. We do not ally ourselves with species who have not yet mastered quantum displacement or achieved at least level 7 civilization status. You are barely level 4. Tell me, human, why should we waste our resources on such a primitive partnership?" The human smile never wavered. If anything, it grew wider. "What do you say to a question like this? Let me tell you what humanity's finest diplomat said to the most powerful being in 3 sectors. Matriarch Celathorn," he began, and his voice was steady, without the tremor of fear that we expected. "You're absolutely right. We're primitive. Our ships are slow, our weapons are crude, and half the species in the Concordance think we're barely evolved apes playing with fire. But here's the thing." He took a step closer, and every guard in the chamber tensed. "When the Kryn horde invaded the Outer Rim colonies 3 months ago, who showed up first to help evacuate the civilians? It wasn't the Velkari battle fleet. It wasn't the Xylothian peacekeepers. It was 12 human cargo ships, retrofitted with emergency life support, piloted by volunteers who knew they probably wouldn't make it back. 7 of those ships didn't." The chamber fell silent. We had heard of this incident, of course. The Kryn invasion had been dealt with swiftly by the proper military channels. The loss of several primitive vessels had been noted in the reports as a statistical footnote. "We're not asking for charity, Matriarch," the human continued. "We're offering partnership. You have the strength, we have the will, and in this galaxy sometimes will matters more than firepower." Matriarch Celathorn regarded him for a long moment, her compound eyes processing his words, his stance, his entire being. Then she did something that shocked every Velkari in the chamber. She rose from her throne and descended the steps to stand before him, towering over his small human frame by nearly 2 full meters. "You speak well, Marcus Chen of humanity," she said. "Perhaps there is value in your species after all. Let us begin these negotiations with the traditional gesture of mutual respect." She extended her primary claw toward him, palm upward, in the Velkari sign of peaceful intent. It was a formal gesture, one we used when meeting other species of sufficient standing. The proper response, which surely his briefing materials had covered, was to bow one's head and touch one's forehead to the extended claw. The human looked at her claw. Then he looked at her face. Then he did something that changed the course of galactic history. He reached out with his small, 5-fingered hand and grasped her claw firmly, moving it up and down in what we would later learn was called a handshake. The moment their skin made contact, the air in the chamber seemed to crystallize. A pulse of bioelectric energy, visible to all present as a ripple of blue-white light, exploded outward from the point of contact. Matriarch Celathorn's eyes went wide, her pupils contracting to pinpoints. The human gasped and stumbled backward, but their hands remained locked together, surrounded by a corona of energy that grew brighter with each passing second. "Matriarch!" I shouted, rushing forward, but she held up her other claw to stop me. I can feel him," she whispered, and there was wonder in her voice, wonder and terror in equal measure. "His thoughts, his emotions, his entire essence. By the ancestral swarm, what has he done?" The human, Marcus Chen, was breathing hard, his face pale beneath his dark skin. What's happening? There's something in my head. Images. Memories. These aren't mine. These can't be mine." The energy slowly faded, but their hands remained clasped. When they finally broke contact, both of them staggered. I caught the matriarch before she could fall, feeling the tremors running through her exoskeleton. 2 of the human security detail rushed forward to support their ambassador, who looked as if he might collapse at any moment. "Seal the chamber," Matriarch Celathorn commanded, her voice still steady despite her obvious distress. "No one speaks of what happened here. Bring the high geneticist, immediately." What human trait do you think aliens would misunderstand the most? Let me know in the comments below. High geneticist Kormoth arrived within minutes, his sensor array already active and scanning. He was old, even older than the matriarch, and his expertise in Velkari biology was unmatched in the Imperium. He examined both the matriarch and the human with his instruments, his secondary arms working controls while his primary arms manipulated holographic displays that only he could fully understand. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he looked up at us with an expression of absolute disbelief. "It's impossible," he said flatly. "Completely, utterly impossible. And yet the evidence is irrefutable. They are bonded." "Bonded?" I repeated, not understanding. "But the sacred bond can only form between a matriarch and her chosen heir. It requires intent, ritual, the consumption of the bonding enzyme. It takes hours of preparation and—" "I am aware of the traditional requirements, Sentinel," Kormoth interrupted. "Yet here we are. The neural pathways are established. The pheromone markers are locked. The quantum entanglement of their bioelectric fields is complete. By every measurable standard, Matriarch Celathorn and Ambassador Marcus Chen are now soul-bonded." The human had been following this conversation with growing alarm. Wait, he said, holding up both hands. "Soul-bonded? What does that mean?" I just shook her hand. "It's a greeting. We do it all the time on Earth. You can't tell me that a handshake created some kind of permanent psychic link." "Can't I?" Kormoth replied, his tone dry. "Tell me, Ambassador, what is the matriarch's favorite color? And before you say you don't know, search your thoughts carefully." Marcus Chen opened his mouth to protest, then stopped. His eyes went distant, unfocused. "Purple," he said slowly. "Deep purple, like twilight before the first stars appear. But not the purple of her chitin, a different shade. The purple of the crystal flowers that grew in the garden where she played as a larva." He blinked, focusing on the matriarch with shock. "How do I know that?" "I can see it. I can see the memory as clearly as if I was there. Matriarch Sellathorn had gone very still. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. His mother's name was Li Wei. She died when he was 12 cycles old. Lung cancer. He held her hand in the hospital and promised her he would make the world better. He became a diplomat because of that promise. She looked at the human with something approaching awe. I can feel his grief as if it were my own. I can feel his determination, his hope, his fear. Stars above, I can feel everything. The human diplomat and the alien matriarch stared at each other across the chamber. And in that moment, I think they both truly understood what had happened. They had become two halves of a singular whole, bound together by a biological mechanism that neither species had known could bridge such vast evolutionary differences. This is a disaster, I said, because someone had to say it. The sacred bond has never been formed with an outsider, much less a member of another species. The council will demand his death. They'll say he corrupted the matriarch. They'll call for war with humanity. They can try, the matriarch said, and there was steel in her voice. But they will fail. I will not allow harm to come to Marcus Chen. I cannot allow it. If he dies, I die. That is the nature of the bond. And if you die, the Imperium falls into chaos, Kormoth added. Succession wars, political upheaval, millions of lives lost in the power struggle. The Council will have no choice but to accept this, however unprecedented it may be. Over the following days, as news of the bonding spread through the upper echelons of Velkhari society, I watched the two of them adapt to their new reality. It was fascinating and terrifying in equal measure. The matriarch would reach for a datapad, and Marcus would hand it to her before she could speak the request. Marcus would feel hungry, and the matriarch would order his favorite foods from Earth before he realized he wanted them. They finished each other's sentences. They moved in unconscious synchronization. They were becoming something that neither the Velkhari nor humanity had ever seen before. But it was not just the practical aspects of the bond that changed things. It was what they learned about each other, what they learned about their species. I was present for one of their private conversations, standing guard as protocol demanded, when Marcus asked the question that had been haunting him. "Why didn't you tell me," he said quietly, "about the bond, about what would happen if we touched? Your briefing materials for my delegation mentioned nothing about this." The matriarch was silent for a long moment, her claws tracing patterns on the arm of her chair. "Because it should not have been possible," she said finally. "The sacred bond is a relic of our evolutionary past, Marcus. Millions of cycles ago, before we achieved sapience, Velkhari queens would bond with their strongest daughters to ensure the survival of the hive. It was a biological imperative. As we evolved, as we became individuals rather than drones, the bond became ritualized, controlled. It requires genetic compatibility, specific pheromone markers, conscious intent. You have none of these things. You are human. You are as different from me as a creature can be and still be carbon-based. It should have been impossible." "But it wasn't," Marcus said. "No, it wasn't. And do you know what I find most disturbing about that? Not the bond itself, not the political complications, not even the permanence of it. What disturbs me is that when I touch your mind, when I feel your emotions and see your memories, I find that we are not so different after all. Your species and mine. You have the same capacity for love, for loyalty, for sacrifice, the same fears, the same hopes. We built our entire society on the belief that the Velkhari were unique, that our consciousness was special, that we were superior to younger species like yours. And yet here you are, bonded to me through a mechanism that supposedly only works between Velkhari of the purest genetic lines. What does that say about everything we believed?" Marcus was quiet for a long time. Then he smiled that human smile, the one we had learned meant he was feeling a complex mixture of emotions that couldn't be easily categorized. "Maybe it says that consciousness is consciousness, no matter what form it takes. Maybe it says that the things that make us people, the things that really matter, aren't about our biology or our technology. Maybe they're about something deeper, something universal." The matriarch reached out with her claw, slowly, deliberately. Marcus extended his hand. This time when they touched, there was no explosion of energy, no dramatic display. Just a gentle warmth, a sense of completion, of two beings who had accepted their fate and chosen to make the best of it. "You are a wise creature, Marcus Chen," the matriarch said, "for a primitive." "And you're pretty insightful yourself," Marcus replied. "For an ancient alien bug queen." I saw the matriarch's mandibles twitch in what I had learned to recognize as amusement. They were joking with each other, bonded together by cosmic accident, facing political turmoil and the judgment of two entire civilizations, and they were joking. That was when I first began to understand what humanity truly was. The council convened 3 weeks later, and it was as hostile as we had anticipated. 12 of the most powerful Velkari in the Imperium, each representing a different hive clan, each with their own agenda and their own opinions about the abomination that had occurred. They sat in their high seats looking down at the matriarch and her human bondmate, and I could feel the tension in the chamber like a physical weight. "This is unacceptable," High Counselor Vexthar declared, his voice resonating with artificial harmonics that marked him as a veteran of the speaker's trials. "The sacred bond formed with an alien, a human no less. This is a corruption of everything we hold holy. It undermines the very foundation of our society." "Does it?" the matriarch asked calmly. "Or does it expand our understanding of what we are capable of? The bond exists, Counselor. It cannot be undone. The only question is how we respond to this new reality." "We respond by severing it," another counselor said coldly. "The human dies. You undergo the rite of severance. Yes, it will be painful. Yes, it will diminish you. But you will survive, and our traditions will remain intact." Marcus had been standing silently beside the matriarch, but now he stepped forward. I moved to stop him, but the matriarch's subtle gesture told me to stand down. "With respect, counselors," Marcus said, his voice clear and strong. "You're looking at this all wrong. You think this bond is a weakness. You think it's corrupted your matriarch, made her less than what she was. But I've spent the last 3 weeks living in her mind, feeling what she feels, seeing what she sees. And I can tell you with absolute certainty that Matriarch Celathorn is the strongest being I've ever encountered. This bond hasn't weakened her. If anything, it's made her stronger. It's made both of us stronger." "Bold words from a primitive," Vexthar sneered. "But words are wind. What proof do you offer?" Marcus smiled, and there was something dangerous in that expression. Something that made even the counselors lean back in their seats. "You want proof? Fine. Matriarch, show them." The matriarch rose from her seat, and as she did, something changed in the chamber. Her bioelectric field, normally contained and controlled, expanded outward, filling the room with a pressure that made my exoskeleton ache. But it was different from before, stronger, more focused. And underneath it, threaded through every pulse of Velkari energy, was something else. Something warm and fierce and utterly alien. Human determination. "The bond has given me access to something the Velkari lost millions of cycles ago," the matriarch said, her voice carrying a weight that went beyond mere sound. "Humans, counselors, do not have a hive mind. They do not share a collective consciousness. Every single human is a completely independent entity, making their own choices, following their own path. This should make them weak, fragmented, easy to control. But it doesn't. Do you know why? Because each human carries within them an absolute certainty that they matter, that their choices have meaning, that even in a universe of trillions of sentient beings, their individual existence is significant. That certainty, that sheer force of individual will, is what I now share with Marcus. And it is more powerful than any weapon in our arsenal." The chamber was silent. The counselors looked at each other, mandibles twitching with unspoken communication. Finally, Vexthar spoke again, but his tone had changed. There was uncertainty in it now, and something that might have been fear. "If what you say is true, then this bond is not a weakness but a potential weapon, a dangerous one. How do we know the human will not use this connection to control you, to manipulate the Imperium through you?" The matriarch and Marcus looked at each other, and I saw something pass between them, some wordless communication that the bond allowed. Then Marcus turned back to the council, and when he spoke, his words were simple but devastating in their honesty. "Because I don't want to," he said. Because the whole point of being human is that we get to choose, and I choose to be her partner, not her master. I choose to help the Velkari, not control them. I choose to use this bond to build a bridge between our species, not a leash. You can believe me or not, that's your choice. But I'm not going anywhere. You kill me, you kill her. You accept me, you gain an ally who will fight for the Imperium as fiercely as any Velkari, because her fight is now my fight. If you believe humanity's greatest strength is its heart, hit that subscribe button and join our journey across the stars. 3 cycles have passed since that day in the council chamber. The Velkari Imperium and humanity signed a formal alliance 6 months later, the strongest pact either species has ever entered. Marcus Chen still serves as Earth's ambassador to our people, and Matriarch Celathorn still rules with the wisdom and strength that made her legendary. They are bonded, irreversibly and permanently, and that bond has changed both of them in ways that neither species fully understands yet. But I understand one thing now, after watching them work together, fight together, live together. I understand why humans are terrifying, not because they're strong or advanced or particularly clever. They're terrifying because they turn accidents into advantages. They took a cosmic mistake, something that should have destroyed both of them, and they made it into the foundation of an alliance that is reshaping galactic politics. They didn't do it through logic or calculation. They did it through sheer, stubborn refusal to accept that anything is impossible. The human walked into the throne room thinking he was going to shake hands and negotiate a simple trade agreement. He walked out soul-bonded to the most powerful leader in 3 sectors, and his response wasn't despair or anger or even fear. His response was to smile and say, "Okay, let's figure out how to make this work." That is humanity. That is what makes them special. Not their technology, not their military might, not even their much-vaunted emotions. It's their ability to look at disaster and see opportunity, to find hope in hopelessness, to turn a handshake into a revolution. I was there when the impossible happened. I was there when a simple human gesture shattered everything we thought we knew about the sacred bond, about compatibility, about the barriers between species. I was there when Marcus Chen accidentally became bonded to Matriarch Celathorn, and I am still here, watching the ripples of that moment spread across the galaxy, changing everything they touch. The Velkari spent 3,000 cycles believing we were unique, special, superior. It took one human, one handshake, one moment of accidental connection to teach us the truth. We're not unique. Consciousness is not confined to any single form or structure. The things that make us people, the capacity for connection and growth and love, exist in patterns we never imagined possible. Marcus Chen taught us that. Not through war or conquest or superior technology. He taught us through a handshake. And now, every time a Velkari meets a human diplomat, every time our species interact, we remember that lesson. We remember that sometimes the greatest breakthroughs come not from careful planning or logical analysis, but from simple, honest gestures of friendship between 2 beings who don't yet understand how similar they really are. The human thought it was just a handshake. The matriarch thought it was a formal greeting. They were both wrong. It was the beginning of a new era, an era where the impossible becomes possible, where ancient laws can be rewritten, and where a chance encounter between an alien queen and a human diplomat can change the fate of civilizations. That is the power of humanity. That is what they bring to the galaxy. The absolute, unshakable belief that connection is possible, even across the vast gulf of evolution and culture. Even when every law of biology says it can't be done, especially then. I am Sentinel Krevas, personal guard to Matriarch Celathorn, and I have witnessed the impossible. I have seen a human and a Velkari become one, and I know with absolute certainty that this is only the beginning.